The beauty of your seeking is beyond telling, and the continuing growth in harmony within each in the group and within the group is also a pleasure to see growing. We are much in appreciation of this circle and would address the question that it has put to us at this time. Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. Today we are going to go over some wonderful channelings by Quo that deal expressly with fear, and in some cases with its relationship to love. Fear is at the heart of many spiritual questions. We have dealt with fear on several episodes, including Joseph Murphy, and fear is important, especially when we're talking about consciousness and reality creation, because it is a feeling-based emotion that is creative in that it creates reality. And one of the key things that we need to learn is how to overcome fear and understand it. Because if we don't, we will continue to see the things that we fear in the world around us. Quo is a group of entities that are channeled by LL Research that deal with questions about the law of one and consciousness. Many of these channelings are incredibly powerful, and for more background information, check out the Quo playlist on the channel. We begin with the channeling delivered on January 27th, 1991. The question this afternoon has to do with fear and the various ways in which it expresses in our being. We have various ways of experiencing fear. Some of them have to do with relationships with others. We curtail certain thoughts, feelings, or actions, hoping that we won't excite the response from another person that will cause that fear in us to be realized. Or we don't curtail the action and we express violently, angrily, and become fearful of the emotion itself, also fearful that it might have repercussions causing a disease such as cancer. That would be a way to point out the distortion so that we would work on it. We have, of course, the concept of love, in which we feel and believe that love can overcome fear, can heal wounds. But how does one put love to work in one's life and make the balance again come into being? How do we overcome? Or is there an overcoming? How do we work with fear? And how do we bring love to bear upon the situation? Carla Channeling says, "We are those known to you as Quo. We greet you in the love and in the light of the one infinite Creator. We greet this instrument in the name of Jesus the Christ. We thank this instrument as always for the care with which it prepares for contact, for it creates the secure contact both for us and for the channel. May we express our appreciation and gladness at this opportunity to blend with your vibrations. The beauty of your seeking is beyond telling, and the continuing growth in harmony within each in the group and within the group is also a pleasure to see growing. We are much in appreciation of this circle and would address the question that it has put to us at this time. Fear is an experience in which an entity perceives itself as helpless and therefore a victim for those who are powerful. The infant is born into a fearful environment, whereas within the womb the infant has warmth and secure cradling, a constant supply of food and liquid, and the reassuring heartbeat and enfolding maternal love of the entity which carries it. It suddenly experiences exposure, wetness, coldness, pain, stricture and vastness, enormous, unbelievable vastness. Against the cold, the damp, the vulnerability, and the lack of easily perceived love, the infant has no power or control. It is helpless, and so the life experience of an incarnate entity begins, rooted completely and solidly in fear. To this original bias are added the many ways in which larger entities may create perceptions of helplessness in their dealings with smaller entities. When a larger entity disapproves, corrects, or simply says no, The smaller entity has no power of appeal past its ability to use the language. Even if it does use the language, it is not likely to be heard, or if heard, grasped with any degree of respect. So the entity experiences throughout the years of being small and human more and more reasons and occasions upon which fear has been perceived. During these same years, perceptions of love have also been received. In some cases, either the young entity perceives all the parents do as beautiful and loving, or the parents are actually creating a supportive, loving, and helpful environment in which the child perceives again the heartbeat of love that moved from the mother so easily to the heartbeat of the child in the womb. However, it is most likely that entities will have chosen situations within the childhood that will specifically sharpen and make keen some of the primal fears with which the entity began the incarnation. If fear is not a mistake, then it must have been planned. The plan of learning in third density is the plan of creating opportunities for entities to make choices. These choices need to be made freely and without duress. To cause an entity to allow fear to evaporate and to turn instead and embrace love is acceptable. But to cause an entity to do so is an infringement of free will. Consequently, it is just as incorrect for an entity to cause itself intellectually to turn to love as it is for another to evangelize and pull the unready or unripe entity away from the fear which it needs, that it may embrace a love which it as yet is not able to embrace. In the mature years of life, when the basic elements of physical security have been established, when there is food, clothing, and protection, then it is that the entity's mind is free to consider how better to experience the incarnation than it may experience it at the present moment. And the first notions that entities tend to bring to the mind's eye as undesirable are those emotions which cluster about those things which are feared by the entity. These are perceived as personal, difficult, and uncomfortable. Perhaps the key in finding a larger viewpoint of how to gaze at fear is to move backwards and see that the nature of the self being infinite, it cannot consist in finite matters. The fear is not finite. It is spiritual material or catalyst, but the fear becomes catalyst seriously taken when that which is its object is accepted as a real object. In other words, if one were aware that one were viewing a three-dimensional movie, and then one saw the car coming at one would scream, but with delight mixed with the fear, for one would be aware that this was a special effect, an illusion created by technological and advanced methods. However, if instead this same vehicle rushes towards the entity within the illusion, which is called the incarnational life, this auto is perceived not as illusory, but as real and dangerous, and the illusory physical vehicle instinctively jumps out of the way. No thought need to be taken, for the instinctual physical vehicle moves on fear, away from discomfort, far more than it moves toward truth or beauty, dignity or grace. In existence, it asks only that it not be hurt, that it be fed and maintained. This is the portion of the self that fears. It fears because it does not perceive itself as an illusion. Let us gaze at this statement. Do each of you perceive yourselves as an illusion? Or do you feel that you yourself are real, dwelling within an illusion? It is our opinion that in a very important way each in third density is indeed an illusion, the portion of the intellect that identifies itself and its consciousness with the continuation of the physical vehicle not only acts within the illusion but is, in its very nature, an illusion. For the goal of consciousness is not to preserve the incarnational experience beyond its natural length. And the length natural to any incarnation seems quite arbitrary to the entity which continues until it does not. There are, however, rhythms, and a natural death, no matter how violent or quick, is that which is a part of the function of the illusory vehicle within the illusion which it has been made to enjoy and from which it has learned. So you may see all of these fears that you experience as illusion perceiving illusion. What is yourself? Is it an ounce of this or a cup of that? Can you locate yourself? Is there a point about which your consciousness is fixed? Not within the illusion, my friends, not within the illusion. It is part of the illusion that you perceive yourself as a fixed self about which radiates the entire universe. You are, however, not fixed. You are not fixed. You are not fixed within the body which you inhabit. You are not fixed within the choices you have made in the past. And you are not fixed in your perceptions of your own nature. Your own nature, in fact, is infinite, and therefore cannot be in any way fixed. You do not have the need for mass. Your nature is that of light. Light is created by one thing only: love. Because of free will, you experience various things, and because of the perceptive web of your physical vehicle, because of the way this vehicle's mind takes in data and prioritizes it, the untutored soul will pay first attention to those which it fears, but only in order to avoid them. Now, if you do not have a fixed self, you are not a target. Fear is always of something, and you are imperishable light. What do you have to do with things? Turn then, in blind faith, when you fear, and look at what you fear the most, as long as you may. It is no shame to be unable to do it very well. It is, however, to be hoped that the practice would continue, and continue, and continue, for in each seed of fear that your infanthoods and childhoods have sown, there are collateral and dependent sub-fears which radiate out from the solidification given to this point of fear. When one examines the object of the fear, one will find that which is love, made of light, a situation, a creature, a concept, whatever is feared, which has been created by the infinite one, by logi, sub-logi, and most probably largely solidified and made fearsome by the sub-sub-logos, which is yourself. Turn and look at the object of fear. Define what it is you fear. Much of the fear of things is that they are making you feel helpless and powerless. Look at these feelings. Look at the object of these feelings. Leave the feelings completely and gaze steadily at the object. See it. Perceive it. In and of itself does not stimulate emotion. It simply is. The fear is an entity, which is a kind of quality. Only by choice can it be attached to any object. It is a modifier of objects, as your adjectives are modifiers of words. As nouns are distorted by their qualifying elements, adjectives, adverbs, dependent clauses, so is your consciousness disturbed by fear when it has been attached to an object. Detach it from the object, and you may see that it is not your fear. It is not anyone else's fear. It is a quality known as fear, which modifies the opinion of an entity who chooses to perceive through the lens of fear some certain object. Remove the fear. Gaze at the object. You cannot own fear. You can only borrow it from the stockpile of possible qualities. Like all negative and positive emotional sets, it is not personal, it is not yours, it is not anyone's. It is a potential quality of feeling and thought. Now let us turn and ask ourselves why this fear is necessary spiritually. Each aware of the nature of third density. It is a density of opposites. Where there is love, there is fear. Other terms for love and other terms for fear exist. Where there is good, there is evil. Where there is light, there is darkness. Where there is hope, there is despair. Where there is compassion, there is bigotry, prejudice. Where there is life-saving grace, there is life-killing brutality. The spiritual entity must face the fact that it always has a choice. It does not feel, seem, appear, or look to the senses as though, in many cases, one had options. Examine any situation which seems without possible options for the feeling tones of fear. whether they be angry fear, frustrated fear, terrified fear, or the fairly purely perceived fear of helplessness and powerlessness. Lack of control is the basis for reaching out and pulling into the life experience this quality of fear. It is a simple choice. When fear is felt, and after it is recognized that the self is not fixed, and it does not have to fix fear to any object, it then is aware that it may proceed further and gaze at the object of fear to find a positive or affirmative quality which may be seen to be that which love offers in that same object of attention. You cannot blink when you gaze at the object which is causing you fear, because it is up to you to choose how you shall respect this object. Shall you respect it by fearing it, by bowing before it, by accommodating yourself to it, regardless of the cost? Or shall you relate to this in love, offering it the respect of compassion, and in many cases, the appreciation of and respect for opportunities that may seem very, very challenging? It is not an easy process to balance the fear within the life pattern. At all times, the body which you enjoy will have its instinctual life to live. There are things of which it is appropriate to be afraid, unless one wishes to end an incarnation. These things are learned, enter into the automatic portion of the mind's clear memory, and before the mind can even think, that memory which is almost muscular moves one out of the innumerable situations in which life, limb, or some other quality would either be terminated or made very uncomfortable. This is an acceptable portion of the instinctual red ray energy, and not to be confused with fears which have an object which does not in and of itself cause all who observe it to be afraid. When an entity chooses to dwell in love and to accept all that is given without fear, the degree or quality of love which it is possible to perceive is greatly enhanced. Like any other portion of a life in faith, it is not the first determination alone to look at a fear which delivers one from fear. For fear may be attached to any number of objects. Consequently, it is to be expected in the life experience of one working spiritually that the evolving self will repeatedly experience a fear of something, and always the situation must be gazed at apart from the fear. It must be seen that fear, like love, is not something one can own, but is an energy, or a quality, or a vibration which is allowed by the entity to move through the being of the entity and to radiate a certain kind of vibration. The vibrations of negative emotion are most uncomfortable, especially to that portion of the self that is attempting to become more loving. But one cannot move from fear to love and expect love to overcome anything. This is a misunderstanding of the suggestion that love does cast out fear that is found in your holy works. Love is not aggressive. Love does not cast out. Anger may cast out, but that is not clear, open-hearted love, but rather a blocked and incorrectly or inexpertly expressed love, even if the one to whom you refer is known to you as Jesus, as the entity is recorded to have thrown over tables upon which lay money made by priests, not for the glory of the Creator, but for the betterment of the priest's pockets. It must be understood that this entity was capable of error. This entity acted out of a kind of fear called anger. It is a kind of moral or ethical feeling common to those with ideals when dealing with that which your peoples call politics. Fear and the expression of fear can be balanced by looking at the object of the fear, and then allowing love to teach from within, in its own time, amidst confusion and darkness, how to see that same object affirmatively. Thusly, love casts out fear when love is invoked as a quality which will modify the noun of that object. Fear is no noun. Fear is not a thing. The self which fears is not a thing, but an experiencer of illusion. Learning spiritually involves moving beyond that illusion in blind faith, and invoking a higher truth, higher than can be comprehended by the mind within the illusion. One must trust one's heart for spiritual wisdom, for it is not within the mind. The mind overcomes, the heart loves. And when the heart is actively loving an object, fear does not have room to modify that same object, unless the love is not complete. And when one sees oneself in mixed feelings, one must once again face the object, for it is that catalyst to which you may choose your response. You may choose creatively. You may choose positively. You have these options at all times. Before we leave this instrument, we would like to express that it is understandable in the extreme that this concept is difficult to put into practice in the third density life experience. It is the calling into action of higher truths, of non-word modifiers to word-type objects. You invoke a concept to modify a word. You invoke infinity to modify finity. The subtleties of this process are many, many layered. As you unearth one layer of a circle of fear within personality, you are not finished, for you will find a deeper layer, and deeper until finally you find yourself in the womb being forced out, and learning what it is to feel abandoned, helpless, and above all, completely alone. That is fear, and you are no longer helpless. We moved to a channeling in November 28th of 2004. They asked, the question today has to do with the relationship between love and fear. We are told there is a relationship, and that if we can learn how to find the balance in this relationship, that we can help love to overcome fear. Could Quo tell us the relationship between love and fear? The query that you ask this day is at the heart of the movement from your present third density world and experience to the fourth density world of love. You dwell at this time in a density that is attempting to learn what it is to love unconditionally. In the next density, the density of love and understanding, the atmosphere is one of unconditional love. It may seem to be paradise standing in third density and thinking about living in unconditional love. And certainly, relatively speaking, it is paradise to dwell consciously in the atmosphere of total acceptance. However, the interplay betwixt love and fear continues in fourth density as the shadows, those shadows that you now experience in third density, are penetrated. That dynamic continues because as light is brought into the darkness, it reveals more subtle patterns of shadow and light so that the dynamic continues and deepens. As you move forward in the process of spiritual evolution, you will find yourself continuing to uncover areas that were previously unknown to you within the very complex pattern of your total personality. So this is not a question that will go away as you learn more. It is a question that will deepen and intensify, for there is no end to the mystery of this dynamic between love and fear. In the world of ideas, qualities like love and fear are entities. To put a face and a body to love is perhaps to imagine a feminine figure, loving and maternal, with open arms and an open heart and a willingness to embrace. To put a face and a body to fear is perhaps to imagine a male figure clad in an enveloping cloak in which are gathered all of the treasures that this figure is attempting to hold tightly to himself. We describe them in this way for two reasons. Firstly, we wish to spark your own imagination, for it is instructive to think upon what love looks like to you and what fear looks like. But also we describe them in this fashion because there is a natural dynamic betwixt the feminine and the male principles and the yin or feminine aspect. There is the expensiveness, the generosity, and that quality of unconditional love that is personified, say, in the image of Mother Mary, the Madonna, or Kuan Yin, or Mother Earth, or Mother Nature. In the yang, or male aspect of creation as a whole, there is the flexing of muscle and the contracting around ideals and ideas, and those ideologies that give rise to action. We have said before that your culture as a whole is overbalanced towards the male principle and has, as this instrument would put it, gotten stuck in the repetitive cycle of male energy that is aggressive and in many ways based upon fear and the determination to respond to that fear by acquiring and controlling resources and power. Those who are in power within your various nation states have many good reasons for these aggressions, these acquisitions and this use of power, saying that it is for the benefit of all. And yet, if one examines the heart of such concepts, the energy is wrapped up in fear and in contraction. So the surface of your culture is caught in that contracted state where there is a constant concern for safety and security and a constant quest for having sufficient resources to meet the future. The ways of fear are insidious, and they have become established within your culture to the point that the natural responses of most entities to the needs of the individual or the society are almost instinctively contracted and fear-based. There is little or no precedent within your leaders or within your role models for gazing at a situation in terms of trust, faith, or love, but rather an almost inevitable bias towards gazing at a situation from the standpoint of concern, worry, projection into the future, and contraction around these concerns and worries and projections. It is time for your peoples, which expresses the energy of that stuck male domination. And we do not mean this in terms of sexuality. For many are the men among your peoples who are very able to express feminine energy in their thinking and their actions, and many are the female entities at this time who are experiencing their incarnations from the standpoint of fear and contraction. We speak instead of the dynamic betwixt yin and yang. The question then becomes how to free both men and women from the strictures and the limitations of the masculine viewpoint. When you think about how it feels to be fearful, perhaps you may see that involved in most experiences of fear-based thought, there is the habit of projection into the future. The one known as T2 and the one known as Jim were both speaking earlier of thinking ahead to jobs that need to be done or conversations that need to be held or situations that may arise. And the one known as Jim was speaking of the difference between positive projecting and negative projecting. In the sense of positive projection into the future, there is no projection beyond what could be called architectural or structural projection. And we would offer the example that the one known as Jim has often given of how this entity would prepare for a pole vault during the field games of his school days by imagining and visualizing with great integrity of detail every step of running with the pole to the point where the pole was planted and the body weight was levered and lifted, and the pole was allowed to lift the body up over the bar. And then the rotation would be imagined and the successful dismount. And this entity would repeat this visualization, say, before going to bed and upon awakening, those times when he was most able to be in a very magical and focused frame of mind, so that by the time the one known as Jim came to the actual games and was ready to make his pole vault, he was relaxed and confident, having done this pole vault many times in his imagination. This is positive projection. Negative projection, on the other hand, is far easier to describe because each of those in this circle of seeking has had the conversations in the mind that will be difficult or are expected to be difficult, and has experienced that repetition of thought where one begins to think, well, what if something happens? Then what shall I say? And then one continues thinking in a circular way again. Well, what if this happens? Then what shall I do? Simply riding that cycle around a circular course again and again. In truth, such imaginings do not improve the way that such a conversation will actually go, because there is not simply the self involved in the equation, but also the other self. And no matter how many imaginings one has done about what people will say in the actual conversation, there is always a new and unique twist to how things turn out. And all the vain imaginings fall away before the actual person and the actual conversation. Perhaps the most tragic outcome of such vain circular imaginings would be that one renders oneself incapable of hearing the actual conversation because one has been deafened by one's expectations. We would not discourage entities from looking into the future when it seems appropriate. What we would encourage, however, is the choice of positive projection, of imaging the graceful and efficient way to do something that needs to be done, imagining only your own actions and seeing them as completely successful. This is an excellent way to create positive expectation and a sense of confidence within yourself. The one known as Carla, who is the instrument at this session, was speaking earlier of how she could not see a way to complete her tasks in the situation in which she finds herself. This is because she is not able to use positive visualization, since she does not know what she can expect from herself. When there is a vacuum in a positive situation, it is very tempting to substitute negative projection and simply worry and be concerned about how the future will pan out. We would simply suggest that unless the concern is turned from worry into a dispassionate and calm review of possibilities for solutions, innovations that may improve the picture and so forth, there is no positive or constructive use for the worry. It is difficult simply to take one's worry and concern and lay it down. Yet indeed, that would be our suggestion. Realize that fear has come to visit and has offered you a gift, whether it is wrapped up in a plain brown paper bag or whether it is gift wrapped and has a pretty ribbon as concern sometimes has. It is nevertheless a package of fear. Such packages do not need to be opened. They can be laid aside and neglected while you, having rejected the fear, simply move on to other thoughts and concerns. The one known as R was saying earlier that it is difficult to see how love and fear are two sides of the same coin. We began speaking of love and fear as entities, qualities in the Platonic sense, the world of ideas. And this is a very valid and real world where love and fear do indeed have infinite and ever ongoing lives, as long as they are reflected in the hearts and the minds of those moving through the illusion of incarnation. However, it is easier to see the relationship between love and fear if we move from contemplating love and fear as pure entities and look at them as applied in the lives of each of you, so that they are not entities upon their own, but they are rather a dynamic of choices between which you may choose as you encounter catalyst and find yourself making a choice. When you come to a cusp and are looking at an issue that is yours to look at, whether it is the right use of time, the right use of resources such as money, or any other issue, you come to the issue in some state of imbalance or bias. This instrument was speaking of her own fears earlier when she said that she had consciously to choose to substitute faith for fear. She had consciously to realize that all is well and perfect, and when she did that, she made a new reality in which fear had no part. The coin itself, with love on one side and fear on the other, is you yourself and what you think is important. You are the treasure here. You are the coin of the realm, shall we say. You are a thing of infinite value, and when you have a concern, if you reach with hope and trust and faith, you are reaching into the qualities of love. If instead you approach your issue by contracting into worry and projection, then your choice is fear. Shall you expand around an issue, or shall you contract around an issue? That is your choice. Note that the energies of expansion are locked into the present moment. They do not drift into projections of the future or memories of the past. In the world of love, one begins with the knowledge that all is well, and this pulls one into focus in the center of the present moment. In truth, as we said earlier, it almost seems negligent or criminal within the society in which you find yourself to approach issues from a standpoint of love. It does not seem to be prudent or sensible to stay in the present moment, and yet anything but the present moment is an illusion of mind. All that is truly yours to do, to exert control over, or to make choices within, is this present moment. So if you take that image of the self in the present moment as the coin and look to see what the heads and tails of that coin are, archetypically speaking, it is very clear and shining in its simplicity. On one side is love, on the other side is fear. On the one side is expansion into an infinite present with infinite possibilities. On the other side is contraction into a knot and the determination that stems from that contraction to control, to be aggressive, and to make things safe. And this involves one in endless projections into the future and endless projections into the past in order to justify the projections into the future. When one visits in a hospital, one may well be able to sense the presence of a kind of dark energy, that seems somehow to be a part of the atmosphere of this place of supposed healing. This is because there are unseen entities from your inner planes that are negative in nature and that feed upon fear and pain. In any place where there is suffering, these entities will cluster and eat that energy that is coming off of people that are suffering. When you yourself enter into the contraction around fear concerning an issue, you are yourself producing food that is very tasty for these unseen entities. And if your habit solidifies and deepens so that you are constantly running fear-based thoughts and dwelling in the lands of worry and projection into an unsightly and a worrisome future, you are solidifying a habit that will increasingly limit your ability to relax and enjoy the present moment. To move away from these habits of contraction is to move from shadow into sunlight. We do not say that this journey from shadow to sunlight is going to be an easy one. It flies in the face of your cultural training to rely on trust and faith. There are many, many times in each day when you have the opportunity to move into worry. We can only encourage you to do as the one as T2 said, to remain somewhat centered and focused, more so than your everyday state, to be somewhat in a meditative state as you move through moments of your day. For it is just in these tiny moments that the opportunities to make the choice between love and fear appear. The challenge is to be aware when those moments arrive so that you can stop yourself from being triggered into fear and the contraction around fear. We are not encouraging you to lose all fear in dangerous situations. We are not encouraging you to stop steering your car away from an oncoming vehicle simply because you're not afraid. We would encourage you to avoid the oncoming vehicle, certainly. It is at the level of being concerned the next time you get in your vehicle that this will happen again. That we encourage you to trust the moment and not to project into an uncertain future. At this moment, all is well. If you must look into the future, then look with hope. Think to yourself, I might be surprised at how well this will go. Visualize positively. If you must go into the future, and whenever possible, we encourage you to remain at peace and at rest and very alert and watchful, for the universe is speaking to you. One concept we would share with you in this regard is wrapped up in a phrase that this instrument knows from her study of the Holy Bible. It is a quote, "Be not afraid, for help is near." Help is always very near. The Spirit is with you at all times and in all places, nearer to you than your breathing, closer to you than your hands or your own eyes. You are truly cherished and loved. Not because you've done something good, but because you are you, and you are precious to the Creator. Agents of Spirit are in your heart and speaking within your mind. But more than that, all of creation is abuzz with awareness of you and your needs. Watch and see what images come to you, what animals, birds, and tiny creatures cross your path that may have meaning to you and may have a message for you. Begin asking the creation around you for hints and clues. Begin expecting them, and the creation will speak to you in ever-increasing ways. This instrument is informing us that we must leave this topic and ask for other queries at this time. We shall leave you with just one more thought on this subject. The answer to this question is a part of your nature. The answer to what love is lies within you now. For your nature is love. Love created you, and you are a spark of that infinite love. In many ways, spiritual evolution is a process of allowing the real you to come out of all the wrappings and cultural training and old habit. How you have been beaten down by what others have told you, how others have seen you, and so forth. Casting aside assumed wisdom is sometimes a very difficult and lengthy process. But the truth is speaking within you now. Love is powerful within you now. So turn your ears inward to the silence of that heart within and listen for the footsteps of the one who comes with love. Question: we know that Quo is composed of 3 entities in the Confederation, and I would like to know if there is a major speaker speaking. Thank you. We are those of Quo and are aware of your query, my brother. We are composed, as you said, of 3 groups, one of 4th density, one of 5th density, and one of 6th density. In this instruments and our way of describing our relative position experience. This particular principle was created because this particular instrument has a certain way of tuning and preparing for contact with the Confederation entities. She prays for contact with the highest and best contact that she may handle in a stable and conscious manner. It is a very precise request. The entity whom she tended to receive upon making this prayer prior to her contact with those of the Ra group was the Latui group, and she had received those of Latui fairly consistently for several years before experiencing the trance contact with those of the Ra group. As each within this circle is aware, the contact with those of Ra was a very narrow band contact, which is only possible during that window of opportunity when the ones known as Dawn, Jim, and Carla were all in the circle, and when the one known as Dawn passed from this 3rd density experience, the possibility of further contact with this particular entity was ended. However, this instrument continued to tune and pray in the same manner, and those of Latui and others within the Confederation, including those of Hatan and those of Ra, felt that perhaps the creation of a principle would best respond to this instrument's very real desire for the highest and best contact of which she was capable. Since those of Ra could not speak with this instrument in a conscious and stable manner, there was no possibility for that social memory complex being the speaker. However, both those of Hatan and those of Latui had previously enjoyed sharing the thoughts of those of Ra in a teach-learning circle, and the 3 groups decided they would blend into one principle, with the ones of Hatan being responsible simply for projecting a vibration of love, of which I feel sure that each of you is aware as we speak. The ones known as Latui took the responsibility for speaking to this instrument, and the ones known as Ra were part of the process of defining just how to respond to the question that was presented to the principle of Quo. So, as those of Quo speak, it is those of Latui who are creating the concepts which this instrument receives and translates into words. Question. Just before the other question, I had again started to think as to this evening, dealing with folks that I have to deal with this evening, and immediately it popped into my head, please don't focus on negative, fearful aspects of anything involved with this situation. Strictly attempt to think of the other people and what I can do to make them more comfortable with the situation. I think my question to you is, does this thought come from you at the moment? Or is that thought of my all mind, or is it some combination of both? We are those of Quo and are aware of your query, my brother. We see no difficulty or infringement in stating that the impulse of that thought came from your personal guidance, but was enabled and assisted by your very recent interaction with us, in that you truly entered into that which we were offering, and we were truly working with these ideas so that you softened the ground and enabled your ears to hear your own guidance. Question. In the Law of One books, I remember Ra told us that there is a complete transition into the 4th density in 2012. When I think of this current chaotic war situation, I wonder if this stage is delayed. I know you cannot give us the detailed dates, but could you focus a little more about the current situation? We are those of Quo, and we thank you, my brother, and are glad to attempt to speak to your query. Firstly, the dating of the transition into 4th density energy for your planet is fixed. It is a matter of your time moving forward. Just as summer gives way to fall, and fall gives way to winter, so one age is succeeded by another, and one period of time is succeeded by another. For your particular planet and your particular solar system, there is a turning of energy, a rotation into new space-time as well as new time-space. That is inevitable and is the ticking of the clock. This will have been accomplished just as it has been foreseen by many at the approximate date of late in the 12th month of 2011. So roughly speaking, 2012, you saw the full realization in terms of the inner planes of your planet and the time-space aspects of your planet. 4th density will be your system of energy. Now, my brother, as you can well imagine, there is much energy upon your planet at this time embodied in the persons of the individuals living upon it, and the societal groups and structures and governments that these people have created that will be quite inappropriately geared for welcoming 4th density energy. As we have said, there is a habit of contraction and fear attempt to control among your people, which may well end in entities doing great damage to each other and to the planet because, faced with energies they cannot control, they may well contract themselves into the Armageddon that they so fear. We are very hopeful, however, that this will not occur. There is a growing groundswell among your peoples at the soul level of honest and deep revulsion and distaste for the energies of control and destruction. There is a true hope among your peoples that is growing daily for the energies of love and trust and peace to come swelling up like buds opening into flowers in spring. When each of you chooses love over fear, you start something happening in the unseen worlds. You create an energy that is compatible with fourth density. Each time you choose to trust, to love, to have forbearance and compassion, to see the other person's point of view and truly walk in his shoes instead of your own, you are expanding the kingdom of fourth density right where you are. And the more people that begin consciously to do this, the faster this kingdom will expand. We say to you plainly, fourth density is all but complete. As you walk about in third density, the fourth density energy is stronger every day upon your planet. The earth itself is vibrating largely in fourth density now. That is why so many entities are sensing the need to become closer in contact to the earth itself, touching the ground, working with the earth, working with plants and animals and those things that abide in the creation of the Father and have nothing to do with the world of the mind of man. Health is abundant in the earth itself. Its labor is ongoing, but the birth is going well. Perhaps you have noticed many significant catastrophes occurring upon the earth plane. This is the labor of earth. It is attempting to move into fourth density without having to express all at once the incompatibility between third density thought as it exists upon the earth at this time and the fourth density vibration that has been coming. It is attempting to vent the fear and the anger and the narrow-mindedness of humankind in little bits. In a volcano erupting, but not so as to split the earth, or a tsunami or a hurricane that destroys a good deal but does not destroy the globe, or an earthquake which expresses the distress of Mother Earth but not in such a way as to destroy the planet as a whole. We feel very hopeful that this grassroots upswelling from the soul level of yearning for a world of love and peace is powerful enough to continue to create the atmosphere in which the earth may continue its final process of labor by venting these incompatible energies. Meanwhile, you may well have noticed there is an almost runaway experience of many within your plane at this time of conditions such as cancer, which seems to take people from their lives before their time. In many cases, these are situations in which entities have become hardened and set in their habits of thinking, these habits being habitual and repetitive in terms of being anger, fear, and aggression. These entities are predisposing their physical vehicles to end the incarnation because the difficulties of dealing with such a mismatch in vibration between the third density thought and the fourth density incoming unseen reality is simply too great. You will find there are many who depart their incarnations within the next few years because of their inability to welcome the expansive and healing vibrations of fourth density. Contrarily, those coming into incarnation at this time are often very able to vibrate fourth density values and ways of thinking so that as your children are growing up, they are representing individual cases where they have been more and more able to welcome fourth density energies. They are seen by their own parents often as amazing beings, and much has been spoken of these young entities, which are sometimes called indigo children or crystal beings. There are many terms for them, but their difference is that they have come into incarnation with some features of their fourth density inner bodies activated, as well as being activated in third density. We would encourage you to see yourself as a secret agent of fourth density at this time. Have you heard the phrase, perform random acts of kindness? This is the very essence of being a secret agent for love. The once known as Ra long ago channeled through this instrument. When faced with a situation, ask yourself, where is the love in this moment? And we say to you, be an agent of that love and be an instrument of peace. In all situations, there is at least a tiny peephole, a tiny window that lets in the light and the love of the one infinite creator. Do what you can to find it. Make this transition into fourth density personal. If you think in terms of world powers and world wars, you have no control and you can do no useful thing. However, that is a mental projection. You are the center of your universe, and you have the power. You are a magical being, and you are the face of the Creator in the little place that you occupy in this vast creation. Be an agent. Be proud and happy to be an agent of the Creator and be part of the creative principle. And let your light shine. Let your love embrace. We are grateful for your heart and your question, my brother, and we thank this group as a whole for its energy and its beauty and its gift to us. We thank you for being able to share our humble thoughts with you. And again, we remind you to leave all thoughts behind that do not seem right to you. For we would not be a stumbling block in front of you. We are always with you if you ask for us, and we leave you as we found you, in the love and in the light of the one infinite Creator. Adonai, Adonai. This is a very, very important channeling on many, many levels. You may think that some of this seems generic, but it's not. There is an important part at the end of this second channeling that I want to discuss just a little bit, and that is that there are unseen entities that feed on fear. We've discussed this from other channelings. They've implied there are entities from fifth density that feed on fear. It is their food. There's even an implication in other materials unrelated to this one, like Carlos Castaneda, that there are entities that treat the earth sort of like a garden or ranch, and that's where they get their food, because we create fear all the time. And if you are listening to any channeling that focuses on any kind of fear, even if there is some legitimacy to it, they talk about evil cabals or warn you of terrible disasters or an impending apocalypse or be careful or warning or bad thing happening. Remember, it's very subtle because they want you to listen to it as a positive, loving channel. They'll make it sound like it's a loving channel. A lot of these, for some reason, portray themselves as the Galactic Federation, not the Confederation. You'll notice this distinction, but when they say that, they will often say, oh, you should be really fearful of this terrible evil cabal. As they said here, you are the center of your universe. You are a magical being in that you are the center of your universe and you have all the control. Where is the love in this moment? So if you are listening to something and it starts out kind of loving and interesting, and then it gets weird, and if there's any level of fear in it, then I would question that channeling just a little bit. Higher density beings know the dichotomy with fear. Fear is really, really important for us to do this major shift in transition into the new earth, into fourth density. We have to overcome fear, and it's so hard. One of the major facets of third density, and in particular, I think that earth is a very difficult level. If it was a video game, we're at the hardest level. It's pretty tough to walk through this earth density and not be fearful of your job, your taxes, your romance, your love, your house, the weather, sickness, all these things. There's so many things you can be fearful for. And of course, many of the things that you can be fearful for are legitimate and justified. And you have to find a way in those moments to still let go of that fear. I'm guilty of it. You get angry or fearful in some situation, and then those entities show up. Now, I'm going to tell you something. I have seen these entities. And they show up if you're in a hospital or in a nursing home, and there are certain situations where there's a lot of fear or negative energy. There are dark entities that show up and they just eat. And it's not scary to me now that I understand them, because it used to be scary. But if you send them love, that's not food that they want to eat, so they will leave. So love them, and suddenly it shifts their density, and oftentimes they'll have to go backwards because they're in fifth density negative. So they'll have to go back to fourth density negative, back to third, then they'll have to, they have to start all over again. And if you love a negative entity in a situation, you express love in the right way, You can eliminate negative entities. You can shift them. You can change not only yourself, but your entire environment. Your environment is made up of energies that are made up of unseen entities. And you have to learn how to shift whatever is going on in your life away from fear. It sounds simple. It sounds cliche, but it's hard. I know it's hard. It's hard when you open up your phone and you get a text, you get news information, you get bits and pieces of information. Everybody wants to make it fearful on all sides of whatever's going on. We're supposed to fear the vaccine. We're supposed to fear the virus. We're supposed to fear the health. We're supposed to fear everything. There is no portion of what is happening in our society that is not being based around fear. So forget about it. Who cares? There's nothing for you to be fearful of. You are a magical being. You have control. Whatever you imagine in your mind about the situation, the virus is irrelevant. The vaccine's irrelevant. Your health is wonderful. You are choosing to be the center focal point of your power. You are not fearful of anything. And when you shift into that total power of who you are, then you let go of the fear that you would naturally have, which is just a basic reaction. As we got an explanation in the first channeling, it is just an element that's been added that changes the nature of this density, that spices it up. And we are now learning how we use it, and we are learning how to move into that loving fourth density that we were meant to be in. You don't have to worry about your country. You don't have to worry about anything. There's nothing you need to worry or be fearful of. Imagine a greater place, a better place. You have the power to choose to create instead of fear. You can find all episodes of The Reality Revolution at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.